Hi, my name is Esmeralda Rangel, and I'm going to do a presentation of Understanding Evolution of Legal Precedents. And this is a class from CBA 326. So let's start off with going to the first slide. So right now I just want to talk about what is the role of president in the U.S. So there are American courts follow that the doctrine of stare decisis, which in some cases are similar issues known as the precedents, and it is based upon deciding on each judge when deciding a matter before him, when it gets when it's getting a specific space that it could be selected as a prior case, so it could move on forward from that. And also, it is also known that with the higher courts, they get to decide by having a mandatory precedent on the lower courts, meaning announcing higher courts must be followed in later cases between getting to know what specific case you want to bring into that. Next thing I'm going to go is to court cases. Usually it has to be followed in court cases. It gets to decide of a legal issue as a doctrine of a precedent. There are future cases that comes upon following the decision, meaning that holding an appellate court case, it can force the law. There is a primary characteristics that is between using the common law tradition of its important of precedent. Usually this is used in court cases is because by ruling on an identical factual situation that everyone gets the same treatment by the courts. That's what it's basically just meaning. Next thing I'm gonna go is how is it useful in courts. So it's useful because when it gets to show that the case has decided upon each principle, it is ought not to be binding within the contrary to such principle, but a precedent is to be followed then even when it decides against an establishment of a rule of a law. There is a correctional of abuses that their existence renders them renders them above the law, and it is best to relate based on those type of principles that they have to be useful inside the court. Next thing that I explain what they are and what they're useful and everything like that, we're gonna go into a case of Gideon versus Wainwright in 1963. So this is upon Gideon. The accused was that Clarence Gideon. The crime was about that he stole $5 and a bottle of wine. Based upon this, the trial was that he was not provided with a public defender. The problem was between this case with Gideon, he had to defend himself and had no money to afford a lawyer. The verdict of this case was that he was found guilty. Between that, the sentence that they gave him was only 5 years in prison, he was convicted with that, but I'm going to discuss later on between that. How it all started, this case began with the 1996 arrest of Clarence Gideon, charged with the breaking and entering into Panama City, Florida. He was near in a pool hall and stealing money from his hall's vending machines. With that, he got arrested and changed under these pretense. Only one witnesses saw him doing that type of break-in right there. Next thing I'm gonna go is the trial prosecution. At this trial, Gideon would not afford a lawyer himself. He requested that an attorney must be appointed to represent him. Gideon stated that he did not have enough money to afford a defense attorney to back him up. But he did claim that the Constitution guaranteed him that the right to defense counsel under the 6th and 14th Amendment. Continuing, he was told that by the judge that Florida only provided attorneys to indigent defend charged with only crimes. So this gets to result that that he must be this might be resulted in the death penalty if they were found to be guilty. So as if death penalty really necessary for this type of situation when he didn't really kill anyone, he was just stealing. But it also mentioned that Florida stated that only that those being charged with a capital crime were guaranteed defense counsel. So as that went, it went to trial court. Gideon defended himself, like how I said, but in and out of jail, not a lot of experience with legal processes, he was still found guilty, sentenced 5 years in jail. While there, it began working on his appeal. Legal reasoning, he contended 2 amendments with that, which is the 6th and the 14th Amendment. Those were used in his case. 6th Amendment is all criminals, prosecutions, accused shall enjoy the right to a speedy or public trial. But an impartial jury of the state should a district wherein the crime shall have been committed. So Gideon stated that this was unconstitutional for him. That's where he went to the 14th Amendment. That all persons are born and naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction of thereof are citizens of the United States, of the state where they reside. Whereas the case of Gideon versus Wainwright was politically motivated case, but the Supreme Court had been waiting for a case along that would overturn of the case of Betts versus Brady. Gideon provided them that the case court responded to Gideon with an informal letter. That's where it went to counsel, appointing Gideon A. Ford as a counsel for him to back him up, which he found that Fortas was unconditional. Gideon was have a retrial, so he could have a representative for free, and he was able to acquit him. Fortas found a new evidence that distracted the prosecution, which he found that the money of Gideon did not match up the crime that he committed. It was another war during the time of the break-in. That's where Gideon was at. There were new witnesses that could testify him during that type of break-in that were able to testify on behalf of Gideon. Next thing I'm going to go, the proceeding of Gideon Wainwright. All criminals defense have the right to an attorney at trial. Not everyone can afford an attorney. The legal systems can be extremely confusing, going to deep, like getting a representative. The Supreme Court case are significantly help better the criminal justice to give more rights to the defendants, especially with these type of court cases. And between the Gideon versus Wainwright 1963, the Supreme Court it requested states to provide defense attorneys to all criminals. By charging with serious offense, cannot afford lawyers themselves. The impact of Gideon Wainwright is extremely significant. What affected society is that this decision affected a lot of people with financial stuff. So knowing that they can't afford one, it brings them a little stress that they can't defend themselves or they can't have anyone to help them out to see that they're not really guilty. And if they are brought to court, they can have the best chance possibly to winning their trial without having any paying for a lawyer. It's better for them, even though it just depends on the case, what I'm trying to say. In conclusion, we have discussed how Gideon was arrested upon his case, how the 6th and 4th Amendment was involved during his case, and how he was convicted to it, how wrong information was used in Gideon's case, also how Gideon wasn't provided with a public defender to defend himself, explaining how Gideon had no money to hire an attorney, and in the end that he was sentenced for 5 years in jail, but it's still kind of iffy on about that. And lastly, how it affected society between financial stuff that no one can really afford an attorney. These are my references.